They said old age brings peace, but mine brought me beatings. She kicked me every morning like I was a dog under her boots. I bled. I starved. I begged on the streets in winter because she told me I wasn't worth a meal. Once, I collapsed in the hospital lobby, and she left, said she had shopping to do. But the day I walked back into that same house, wearing silk, holding a gold cane, and owning the deed under my name, that day she knew her time was over. Don't scroll. Let me tell you how I turned from a bleeding beggar to the woman they now fear. This is my story. My name is Marta Kuznetsova, and I used to survive in a damp, peeling room behind my son's garage in a cold Melbourne suburb. I'm 68 years old. My spine doesn't just curve, it crumbles. From age? Perhaps. But mostly from the beatings. Get out of my way, you useless worm. My daughter-in-law, Brianna, snarled as she slammed open the garage door. Her elbow caught my shoulder and sent me tumbling to the floor, where my hip landed hard against the concrete. Something cracked. She didn't care. She never did. Brianna was the kind of woman who fooled the world, blonde hair curled just right, flawless makeup, kind smiles at brunch. But when it was just me and her, the monster came out. My son, Liam, used to hold my hand and ask why clouds cried. Now, he can't look me in the eye. He stands in the shadows of his own house, letting his wife throw me around like trash. That morning, I tried to make a little tea. My fingers ached, every joint swollen and purple from bruises. I spilled a bit on the counter, my first mistake of the day. She heard it. "What's this filth, Marta?" she shouted. I turned, heart skipping. Too late. The slap came fast, across the side of my face. "I told you to stay in the garage, not make a damn mess in my kitchen." She grabbed the chipped mug I'd been using for weeks and hurled it to the floor. Shards flew. I flinched. "You want tea?" she hissed. "Lick it off the floor, beggar." And I did. I bent down, partly because of fear, partly because the pain wouldn't let me stand. My stick? She broke it last week when I tried to go outside without permission. I slept that night in the garage. No blanket. No pillow. Just the cracked floor and the smell of oil and mildew. My son walked past me twice. Didn't even stop. It was Christmas Eve. The neighborhood shimmered with lights and song. Children laughed. Fireworks echoed across the rooftops. And I wept quietly into my torn cardigan, curled into a ball like the stray dogs they treated better than me. But what they didn't know was, the next morning, everything began to change. The next morning, my chest hurt so badly I couldn't breathe properly. Every gasp felt like swallowing broken glass. But Brianna didn't care. She barged into the garage as I lay shivering under an oil-stained sheet and threw a plastic grocery bag at me. "Get dressed," she said. "Liam's driving you to the hospital. You look like a damn corpse, and I don't want a dead old witch in my backyard." She didn't say it with concern. She said it like I was garbage that needed disposal. I didn't argue. I couldn't. My lips were dry, my head spinning. The walk to the car nearly knocked me out cold. Liam didn't speak the entire drive. The man who once clung to my sari and cried when I left for work now acted like I was invisible. He dropped me at the emergency entrance and handed me my cane, the new one I carved myself from a broken broomstick. "I'll be back in a few hours," he mumbled. He never returned. Inside, the hospital smelled of bleach and sickness. I waited 4 hours before they took me in. The nurses looked at me like I was just another charity case, filthy cardigan, bruised arms, shaky speech. I told them I had no Medicare, no family help, no one. The doctor scanned me and shook his head. 3 cracked ribs. Internal bruising. Malnutrition. "You've been through hell, ma'am." I nodded. They admitted me overnight. Gave me soup. A real bed. Kindness. Something I hadn't tasted in years. And just when I thought maybe someone would finally see me, the next morning, Brianna showed up. With shopping bags. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask what I needed. She said, loud enough for the nurses to hear, "She's faking most of this." She wants attention. You know how old ladies get. Then she leaned in close, her perfume choking my throat, and whispered, "If you try to stay longer, I'll tell them you're mentally unstable. You'll die in a psych ward, Marta." She walked out before I could speak. And that was it. They discharged me that afternoon. Just like that. The hospital gave me a voucher for a taxi, but Brianna had already called and canceled it. I walked the entire way back, 5 kilometers, with blood still fresh beneath my ribs and pain screaming in my knees. When I reached home, the garage door was locked. I knocked. No answer. I sat on the cold steps and waited in silence while the evening sun sank into shadows. I was sure I'd die there. But I didn't. And that's where the miracle began. I spent the night on the back porch, curled in my own aching bones. Every breath stung. Every second dragged like an open wound. Brianna never opened the door. Liam never looked out the window. They didn't care if I lived or died. By morning, the frost had crept into my joints like knives. I was too weak to move. I thought maybe that was it. Maybe that porch would be my grave. But then something scraped against my bare foot. I looked down. A pair of worn shoes sat by the garden hose. They weren't mine. I hadn't owned proper shoes in years. These were leather, stiff but whole, like they'd been sitting there a long time. I didn't remember them being there yesterday. Inside one of the shoes was something folded. A letter. I pulled it out with trembling fingers, struggling to focus through the blur of my tears and dizziness. The paper was yellowed, old, but the ink was bold. To Marta Kuznetsova, if you're reading this, it means I finally found you. I've been trying to reach you for years. Please come to 49 Halloran Street, apartment 5A. Don't delay. J. P. J. P. The name hit me like a thunderclap. There was only one man I ever knew by those initials. Joseph Petrovich, my late husband's childhood friend. He used to call me Marta the Mountain because he said I stood tall even in storms. He vanished decades ago after my husband died. I never heard from him again. I stared at the address. I hadn't been to Halloran Street in over 20 years. It was on the other side of the city, wealthier, colder, built with steel gates and closed curtains. I had no phone, no money, not even proper clothes. But something burned in my gut like a rising flame. So I waited for them to leave. Once Liam and Brianna drove off to whatever brunch they attended to parade their spotless lives, I slipped into the garage, wrapped myself in the thinnest coat I could find, and left. I walked, for hours, one step after another, past the bakery I once took Liam to when he was 6, past the train station where Brianna's lies began. I arrived at 49 Halloran Street just before sunset. It was a tall, silent building with a silver nameplate and doorman who looked at me like I was something the wind dragged in. Apartment 5A? I asked, voice trembling. He frowned. You sure you've got the right place, love? I held up the letter. He sighed, then picked up the phone. Moments later, the elevator opened. And standing inside was a woman, maybe 40. Sharp gray suit, clipboard, stern eyes. You're Marta. I nodded. She smiled, but it wasn't pity. It was respect. We've been expecting you, she said. Mr. Petrovich left very specific instructions. She handed me a small envelope. Inside it, a gold key and a folded legal document. Last will and testament of Joseph Petrovich. I, Joseph Petrovich, leave all my assets, accounts, and properties to Marta Kuznetsova, who once fed me when she herself was starving. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe. It was real. All of it. The years of hell. The abuse. The beatings. The blood. And now, this. Revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be calculated. And it would begin with this key. The next morning, I woke in a different world. Not a garage. Not a cold concrete floor. Not with blood dried on my blouse or dust in my lungs. This was a room with warmth, soft blankets, and silence. Apartment 5A had walls painted in calming blue, with sunlight dancing across cream-colored curtains. It smelled like jasmine and old books. But even in peace, my body remembered pain. I sat up slowly, rubbing the bruises on my arms. Some were days old. Some were fresh. And one still burned where Brianna had stamped her heel into my back. It happened 3 weeks ago. She had returned from her tennis club, furious that Liam forgot to pay the cable bill. She blamed me. "What the hell do you do all day, you useless old freak?" she screamed, storming into the garage with her sweaty racket still in hand. "Living here for free, eating like a pig, breathing my air." She didn't wait for an answer. She pushed me so hard I hit the workbench. My head cracked against the edge. I fell to the floor. And while I lay there, bleeding from the scalp, she stood above me, in heels, and stomped. Once, twice, 3 times. On my back, like I was a cigarette she was trying to extinguish. I remember the sound more than the pain. Liam stood in the doorway. His lips parted. His hands shook. But he said nothing. Brianna turned and smiled at him. "She slipped," she said. "Didn't you, Marta?" I nodded. Not because it was true, but because if I didn't, the next stomp might have broken my spine. Now, in the warm glow of Joseph's apartment, I lifted the back of my shirt and looked in the mirror. The bruise was still there. Purple, yellow, angry. But I smiled, because now I had money, I had power, and more importantly, I had proof. Joseph's lawyer, a woman named Ms. Delaney, arrived that afternoon with folders stacked like bricks. "Marta," she said, opening the first file, "Mr. Petrovich's estate is currently valued at $18, $6 million. That includes the apartment you're in now, 3 properties across Sydney and Perth, and his foreign accounts in Zurich, Frankfurt, and Warsaw." I nearly dropped the teacup in my hand. I looked down at my bruised fingers. At the wrist Brianna once twisted so hard I couldn't use my hand for 2 days. At the knuckles raw from scrubbing her bathroom tiles with bleach and steel wool. I looked back up. "Can I see all of it?" I asked. Ms. Delaney smiled. "That's the plan." But first, he also left this note in his handwriting. She unfolded it gently. If Marta's reading this, it means fate finally gave her a damn break. Tell her to do what she wants with it. But if she's thinking what I'm thinking, give hell. I laughed. For the first time in years. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to forgive. I was going to rise. And they were going to fall. It had been 4 days since I stepped into Joseph Petrovich's world, and already I was changing. Not just the bruises fading from my skin. Not just the warm food or the crisp linen or the silence that didn't come with insults. I was changing inside. Where all the rot Brianna poured into me had once festered, something fierce was growing there now. Something sharp. I hadn't told them where I was. I hadn't called. I hadn't begged. Let them wonder. But I wanted to send them something. A whisper of warning. A seed of dread. So I sent a box. No return address. Just a plain white box wrapped in silver ribbon, hand-delivered by courier to Brianna's front door. Inside, I placed my broken cane, the one she snapped in half over her knee and laughed about. A bottle of red nail polish. Her favorite color. Crimson Control, she once called it. And a single note. In my handwriting. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." I imagined her face the moment she opened it. I imagined her hands shaking as she held that stick, knowing it had been buried in the bin behind their garage just 2 weeks ago. And now somehow it was back, cleaned, polished, delivered. That night, I received a call. Blocked number. I answered and didn't speak. Her voice was trembling. "Marta? Is this you?" Silence. You ungrateful witch. Where are you? What are you playing at?" I still didn't speak. "Liam's worried sick," she screamed. "Do you know what the neighbors are saying? That we threw you out. That you're homeless." I smiled. "Good," I said softly. "Let them keep talking." Then I hung up. I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, but because of adrenaline. Because for the first time in years, I held the power. The next morning, I met with Ms. Delaney again. "I want to buy a property," I said. "Not for living." "For staging." She raised an eyebrow. "Staging?" I nodded. "I want to invite Brianna and Liam to dinner. But first, I need a stage big enough for what comes next." I toured 6 estates before I found the right one. Not the biggest, not the fanciest, but the one with the coldest silence in its halls. The kind that echoed, that reminded you of the things you did when you thought no one was watching. It sat on a hill in Glen Iris, Melbourne's quiet wealth pocket. Iron gates, marbled floors, a staircase that coiled like a serpent, and windows tall, sharp, and hungry for secrets. I bought it in cash. Ms. Delaney raised no questions. And I named it Kuznetsova House. For the first time in my life, I put my name on something no one could take away. Not Brianna. Not Liam. Not time. The first thing I did was renovate the dining room. I ordered a grand oak table, 1 seat at the head, 3 along each side. Then I had the floors repolished, but left a single square untouched, a scuff mark shaped like a boot heel. When the contractors asked why, I told them to leave it. Let Brianna see that no matter how shiny her world looks, the scars never vanish. Then I decorated the guest room with careful detail, a nightgown identical to the one she once burned in front of me. A teacup from the same brand she shattered on my face. And photos, old ones, of Liam as a child, laughing with me in the park. His tiny fingers in my hair. She'd know I had them. She'd know I hadn't forgotten. And I hadn't. Not the time she made me kneel in the gravel driveway for 3 hours because I forgot to pick up her dry cleaning. Not the time she spat in my soup in front of her friends and called it a joke. Not the winter she left the garage door open all night just to air it out, and I woke up with frostbite on my fingers. So yes, I remembered. And every corner of this house would remind her, too. The final touch? A dinner invitation. Handwritten. "Mr. and Mrs. Liam Whitlock, you are cordially invited to a private dinner at Kuznetsova House, hosted by a benefactor you once knew." Formal attire. No phones. 1 night only. I had a courier deliver it while they were out. Let them return home and see my name etched into their lives again. Not as a burden. Not as a bleeding shadow. But as the architect of their reckoning. And oh, how I wished I could watch her face when she read it. But patience, Marta. Patience. This time, the blood would run their way. The doorbell rang at precisely 7 p.m. I didn't flinch. I was already seated at the head of the dining table, a glass of red wine in my hand, wearing the silk emerald gown I once found in the thrift store, tattered then, but now custom-fitted and regal. I didn't rush to open the door. I let them wait. Let her heels click on the marble porch. Let him check his watch. Let the silence chew at their nerves. Then I buzzed the gate. A butler opened the door for them. Hired for 1 night only, dressed in black. When they stepped in, they didn't recognize me at first. Of course they didn't. They were looking for a frail woman in rags. Not the one with flawless hair, perfect posture, and a glint in her eye so cold it could split glass. "Good evening," I said softly. Liam froze. Brianna blinked. "Marta," she muttered, her voice higher than usual. Is this you?" I smiled, slow and sure. "It's Mrs. Kuznetsova, tonight." She tried to cover her shock with a laugh. "Well, this is surprising. Quite a glow-up." She looked around. The chandeliers. The gold trim. The oak table. "You live here?" she asked. "I own here," I corrected. "Come in." Dinner was served. 5 courses. Lamb, caviar, truffle soup. All the things she used to eat while I gnawed on dry toast in the garage. She didn't touch the wine. Smart. She didn't trust me. But trust had long expired. "So," she said after the 2nd course, stirring her fork, "where have you been hiding all this time?" Liam said nothing. His eyes were on the photos along the hallway, framed shots of me and Joseph Petrovich, me on the beach, me smiling. Not hiding, I replied. I've been rebuilding. Must have found yourself a rich old fool, she sneered, unable to help herself. I leaned in, voice cool. He was richer than you could dream. But he was also kind. The last man on earth who remembered me before I became your maid. The room fell still. She laughed, sharp and false. You're holding a dinner out of spite, Marta? Really? What's next? A poetry reading about your bruises? I stood, walked over to the side cabinet, opened it, and pulled out the cane. The same one she had broken. Polished now. Placed in a crystal box. I set it on the table, inches from her plate. Her face dropped. I turned to Liam. Do you remember the day she beat me until I bled on the garage floor? I asked. The day you stood there. Watched. Said nothing. His eyes welled, but he didn't answer. Brianna hissed. Don't start this nonsense. I smiled. This isn't the start. This is the middle. You'll know when the ending begins. And with that, I clapped my hands. 2 men entered from the study. Silent. Suited. Security. They placed 2 black folders in front of Brianna and Liam. What is this? She said, barely above a whisper. An agreement, I said. You're going to sign over everything I once bought for your home. Every item. Every dollar I gave you. Every right. And then you're going to leave. Or I release the footage. Footage? Brianna croaked. I tapped the folder. Let's just say, I said sweetly, the walls of your house had more than ears. They had hidden cameras. I was never as helpless as I looked. Her hands shook. Liam's face went white. Brianna stood, fists clenched. You can't do this. This is insane. I leaned forward. Insane? No, darling. Insane was making me beg for food. Insane was dragging me by my hair down the stairs and calling it discipline. This is just justice. She reached for the wine glass and threw it across the room. It shattered. But I didn't flinch. She had already broken everything she could. Now it was my turn to break hers. Brianna didn't sign the papers that night. She screamed. She threw chairs. She spat at my shoes. But eventually she stormed out, dragging Liam behind her like a mutt on a short leash. And I let them go, because I knew what was coming. The next day, I released the first clip. Just one. No names. No commentary. Just a simple video posted anonymously on a community board titled, What She Does to Her Mother-in-Law When No One's Watching. It showed Brianna in her tennis outfit, grabbing me by the arm, slapping me, calling me human waste, and tossing cold water on me as I tried to clean the patio floor on my knees. It spread faster than wildfire. By sunset, it had 18,000 views. By midnight, it had 60,000. People were horrified. Local news picked it up. Talk shows debated whether elder abuse should lead to jail time. A women's rights group offered to support me legally. A nearby church asked to interview me for their care project. But I said nothing, because I didn't need words anymore. I had evidence. 2 days later, Liam came knocking. Alone. He looked thinner. Tired. Sweaty under his wrinkled suit. Mom, he said softly. Please. Can we talk? I let him in. He sat at the same table where he once looked away while his wife kicked my side. Now he held his head in his hands. She's losing everything, he mumbled. The job, the brand deal, even her brother won't talk to her. Please, just stop this. I poured him tea. Do you remember the day she left me at the hospital? I asked, not looking up. He swallowed. You brought me there, then drove off. She never returned. I walked 5 kilometers home with fractured ribs. I pissed blood for 3 weeks. Mom, I know, I snapped. You let it happen. You watched it happen. You said nothing. He looked away. She made me beg outside the supermarket. Liam, I whispered, shaking. She told strangers I was an addict. A thief. Do you know what it's like to be kicked by a teenager in front of a bakery because your daughter-in-law told the whole street you were crazy? Silence. She said you told her to stop, I said. But you never did. He began to cry. Good. Let the guilt seep in. Let it rot what little manhood he had left. You want me to stop? I said coldly. Then do one thing. Anything. I smiled. I want her on her knees. In my house. Scrubbing the floor. His mouth dropped. What? You heard me. She always said I was filthy, right? Time to see if her spine's strong enough to scrub real dirt. He shook his head. She'll never do it. Then you can watch the next video. I stood, walked to the window, and the next, until every last secret spills. Until the world sees the monster you married. 2 nights later, they both returned. Brianna didn't speak. She wore plain clothes. No makeup. Hair tied back. I opened the door, handed her a bucket and sponge, and pointed to the marble floor of the entry hall. You know what to do. And she did it. Silently. Her knees cracked on the tile. Her hands shook. Her eyes, once sharp enough to slice me in half, now hollow. She scrubbed. And I watched, sipping tea. Just like she used to watch me, only this time, the humiliation wasn't mine. It was hers. And it had just begun. By morning, I had sent the next video. This one was shorter, but worse. It showed Brianna holding a broom, shouting, "Clean it with your hands, you stinking bag of bones." Then me on my knees, dragging a dirty rag across the garage floor while she poured vinegar over my head and laughed. The video had a date stamp. It was just 2 months old. I released it on every platform under the same anonymous name, Daughter-in-law Unmasked. This time, I didn't just send it to the public, I emailed it directly to her sponsors, her yoga studio, her business contacts. Even the nonprofit organization where she pretended to volunteer once a year for photos. The response? Swift. Brutal. Beautiful. Her name was pulled from every campaign. Her photo vanished from social pages, and hashtag Brianna the Abuser started trending. Even her own family stopped answering her calls. I knew because Liam came to my door again, red-eyed, saying she hadn't slept in 2 nights. She refused to eat. Someone had egged their car. A neighbor spit on her outside the grocery store. I didn't blink. Instead, I held up a thick envelope and handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked. "Court summons," I said. "I'm suing you both for elder abuse, emotional distress, and theft." He paled. "You're what?" "You heard me," I said. "And I have doctors, nurses, witnesses, receipts, photos. I documented everything for years. Every bruise, every burn, every injury. And now? I have money. And a team of lawyers ready to drag you into the dirt where you left me." He opened the envelope with trembling hands. He saw the legal firm's name. And I saw the panic in his face. "But please," he stuttered. "If this goes public, our lives—" "Oh, sweet boy," I said softly. "It's already public. This is just the paperwork." Then I closed the door. Later that day, I held a press conference. Not for vanity. For justice. The same justice denied to every woman like me who suffered in silence behind closed doors, told to be quiet, told they were just exaggerating. I stood before the cameras in a tailored coat and pearls, and I told them the truth. My name is Marta Kuznetsova. For 5 years, I was beaten, starved, and humiliated by the very people I fed, clothed, and raised. They called me useless. They called me crazy. They made me beg. They laughed as I bled. But I didn't die. I didn't give up. I waited. And now I speak not just for myself, but for every mother, every grandmother, every woman they tried to break. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters scribbled. And somewhere in their dark, quiet house, Brianna and Liam watched their names fall from grace like shattered glass. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because what they feared the most wasn't public shame. It was what I had planned for them next. I sat in my study, watching the news as their faces flickered across the screen. Local Melbourne woman accused of elder abuse. Graphic videos spark national outrage. Once an influencer, now disgraced, Brianna Whitlock's world unravels. Good. Let the world see what I lived through. Let her beauty rot in silence. But I wasn't finished. Not until I took what mattered most to them. So I made a call to my lawyer. I want to buy their house, I said. Off-market deals are tricky, she replied. I don't care. Make it happen. It took only 4 days. Turns out, when the public turns against you, banks panic. Sponsors pull out. Mortgages go unpaid. And suddenly, the two people who once made me sleep beside a leaking water heater were desperate to sell. They had no idea who the buyer was. I bought it through a trust, KZ Holdings Proprietary Limited. Not even the agents knew it was me. Until move-out day. They stood on the front lawn, surrounded by cardboard boxes and cheap plastic bags. Brianna looked like a ghost. Makeup streaked. Hair undone. Eyes sunken. Liam stood beside her like a lost child. Then a black car pulled up. And I stepped out, wearing white gloves. Brianna gasped. No, I walked past them. Not a glance spared. Not a word offered. Until I reached the front porch. I turned, slow and deliberate, the same way she once turned to kick me out of that garage. This house is mine now, I said. Her lips trembled. You can't do this. I stepped closer. You made me bleed on these floors. You made me beg for food. You left me at a hospital like trash. She tried to speak. I raised my hand. No more lies. No more pity. You will leave now. Or I'll have security remove you and film it. Liam took her hand. Let's just go. But she wasn't done. She dropped to her knees right there on the sidewalk and screamed. You old witch. You were nothing. You were dirt. How dare you take this from me? Neighbors stared from windows. Children whispered on their porches. And I leaned forward. No, Brianna. You took everything from me. All I did was return the favor. They left. That night, I walked barefoot through the empty house. I entered the garage, stood in the exact spot where I once slept on cardboard. And I whispered, You're free now, Marta. You're free. But even then, I knew there was still more to be done. Because revenge was not just about taking back power. It was about making sure they could never rise again. Owning their house was only the beginning. I didn't just want to move in, I wanted to turn it into a monument of their failure. So I started with the bedroom. The one with the white velvet headboard where Brianna once laughed as I cleaned the floor with my bare hands, my knees bleeding onto tile. I burned the mattress. Not out of rage. Out of symbolism. That bed had been my prison. Every time I cried myself to sleep in the garage, I imagined her there, warm, spoiled, with clean sheets and no conscience. I replaced it with a simple wooden frame. Strong, sharp corners. The kind that didn't comfort, but commanded. Then I moved to the living room. I ordered the removal of every photo that bore their smiles. Their wedding frame trashed. The canvas she had printed of herself in Santorini? Torn, rolled up, and mailed back to her new address, and signed, without a note. But the real destruction? It came in the form of digital erasure. I hired a team. Young, sharp, and discreet. Scrub her, I said. They didn't blink. In just 3 days, Brianna's online presence vanished. Her influencer account? Gone. Her blog about balanced living? Taken down. The articles she paid to have published about empowering women? All retracted. Her email domain? Expired. I even paid to outbid her name in Google searches. Now, when someone typed Brianna Whitlock, the top result was a link to #JusticeForMarta, the woman she tried to destroy. But I wasn't done yet. I used her own tactics against her. Do you remember how she once made me wear a sign around my neck that read, "Forgot Tio closed the milk, now I starve," and made me stand outside for an hour? Oh yes, she did that. Well, now I had a new sign. And a new person to wear it. I paid 2 young women, both actors, to deliver a care box to Brianna's new address, 2 towns away, in a rotting rental apartment with paint chipping off the walls. In the box, a white t-shirt. On it, printed in bold red, "I beat my mother-in-law, and all I got was this miserable life." Underneath, I included a note. "No cameras this time. Just karma. M.K." I received no reply, but word spread fast. She stopped leaving the house. And when she did, someone filmed her being yelled at by a passerby. "You're the one from the videos, right? The lady basher." I watched it again and again. Not because I enjoyed suffering, but because I remembered my own. All those years of pain, now carved into their reputation. But even with all that public shame, social erasure, financial ruin, something still burned in me. Because Brianna never apologized. And until she did, my war wasn't over. It had been a month since I took their house. 3 weeks since I erased her online. 12 days since I mailed the shirt. And still no apology. Not even a fake one. Most people, after being dragged through the mud, after losing jobs, friends, and dignity, would at least fake remorse. But Brianna? That woman had venom in her bones and pride where her soul should have been. So I planned the next move. I decided to give her the thing she loved most, an audience. Only this time, she wouldn't be the one performing. I contacted a popular podcast, Justice Unmuted, over 4 million subscribers. Their specialty? Exposing hidden abuse stories and confronting the accused live. They had already covered my case. Their followers begged for an interview. So I agreed on one condition. I want Brianna to join me. I want the truth spoken side by side. They laughed. She'll never agree. She will, I said, once I give her no choice. I sent the podcast team a folder. Inside, the last and worst piece of footage. She had forgotten about it. Probably didn't even know I'd managed to hit record. It was the night she made me eat from the floor like a dog. She had poured soup into a plastic container, tipped it over onto the tile, and said, "If you're hungry, old lady, lap it up. Show me how much you want it." Then she filmed it on her phone. Laughing. I had never intended to keep it, but I had. And now? I gave the podcast team a copy. They contacted Brianna's lawyer. She tried to threaten them with defamation suits. Claimed it was out of context. Screamed that she'd call the police. But she had no money left for legal teams. No sponsors to protect her. No press left willing to paint her in a kind light. So she agreed. Under one condition, she got 5 minutes to speak uninterrupted. I said fine. Let the world hear her excuses. Let them hear her shame, unfiltered. The day of the live recording, I arrived in silence, wearing the same gray sweater I had once bled into while she stepped on my back. She arrived late. No makeup. Sunglasses. Hair limp. The once golden goddess of social media now looked like a scolded teenager dragged into the principal's office. She didn't greet me. She didn't look at me. She took her seat. The host began, "Today, we bring you a confrontation years in the making. A victim and her abuser. A woman who suffered in silence and the one who made her scream." Brianna cleared her throat. "This whole thing has gotten out of control," she began. "I never intended to hurt her. Things were taken out of context. There was stress in our home, and play the clip," I said. The host nodded. The footage played live. Audio only. My groaning. Her laughter. My begging. Her voice. "Lap it up, Grandma. Show me how low you can go." Silence. The host's face dropped. Listeners flooded the chat. "This is disgusting. She belongs in prison." I'm shaking. I'm crying. My grandma raised me. This could have been her. Brianna sat frozen. And I leaned into the mic. "You made me eat from the floor. Tonight, I make you eat your words. So go on. Apologize. Or I release the uncut version tomorrow." Her mouth trembled. She looked at the host, then the camera, then at me. And finally, for the first time in all these years, she broke. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Marta." Tears streamed down her face. I was cruel. I was hateful. I thought she was weak. But she wasn't. She was strong. And I deserve everything that's happened. It wasn't enough. But it was a start. And in that moment, for the first time since the beatings began, I wasn't the one shaking. The apology went viral. Within hours of the podcast airing, clips flooded the internet. Viewers applauded me. Celebrities reposted. Women around the world messaged my lawyer, saying thank you for speaking up. I thought I was the only one, but I didn't smile. Not yet. Because apologies made under pressure are not redemption. They're survival instincts. And Brianna had spent too many years thriving on other people's pain. She wasn't sorry. She was cornered. And now that she was on her knees in front of the world, I was ready to take everything else. I learned from the same people who once ignored my bruises. If you want to destroy someone who thrives on appearance, don't just expose the truth, strip them of their future. I started with her last remaining income stream, a silent equity stake in a mid-sized skincare company. She'd invested it before she married Liam. It was in her maiden name. Hidden, untouched, safe. But she made one mistake. She once forced me to sign papers for her at the kitchen table. I remembered the company name. I remembered the logo. And now, I owned lawyers. We combed through every file. Found it. And when the current CEO realized who she was, he panicked. I made an offer to buy her shares privately. Cheap. Silent. Legal. He accepted. And just like that, her last lifeline, the one thing that could have kept her afloat after all the dust settled, was mine. I didn't sell it. I shut it down. The company folded within a week. I sent her a single rose in the mail with the company logo burned into the tag. No note. She'd know. Liam called 3 days later. "Why?" he asked. "She said you took her investment. That she's broke. Again. Homeless now." "She's right," I said. "But haven't you done enough?" I laughed softly. Was it enough when she left me in the hospital? When she kicked me until I bled? When you watched and walked away? He didn't answer. So I leaned closer to the phone, my voice steady and cold. "She ruined me slowly." I returned the favor. Slowly. That same night, I walked past the mirror in the grand hallway of their former house, now mine. For years, I had avoided my reflection. Ashamed of the bruises, of the hollow eyes, of the silence I wore like shackles. But now, I stopped, looked, and whispered to myself, she's almost gone. The woman they beat, the woman they humiliated, the woman they thought would never rise. She was almost gone. And in her place was someone they'd never be able to hurt again. Liam requested a meeting. He didn't ask with arrogance this time. There was no entitlement in his voice, no shadow of the boy who once let his wife turn me into a doormat. He called from a payphone. "I just want to see you," he said. "Alone. Please." I agreed. Not because I owed him anything, but because guilt is a slow poison, and I wanted to pour the final drop myself. We met at a small public garden, not far from the same shopping plaza where Brianna once told me to beg for coins in winter. He was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench, thin, pale, hollow-eyed. He stood when he saw me, like a man meeting a priest before confession. "Mom," he said. I don't know what to say anymore. I sat down beside him, silent. "I was weak," he said. "I let her control everything. I let her hurt you. I didn't think you'd survive it." "You didn't want me to survive it," I replied. "Be honest." He winced. "That's not true." "You knew," I whispered. "Every slap. Every insult. Every time she starved me while you ate." He said nothing. "I didn't need your sword, Liam," I said. "I needed your spine. And you gave me neither." I was scared. "So was I snapped. But I still woke up. I still fought. I still cooked. I still cared." He looked down. That's when I reached into my bag and handed him a small photo album. Leather-bound. Heavy. "What's this?" he asked. "Memories," I said. He flipped it open. The first photo, me with a split lip. The second, me in the hospital with bruises. The third, me, asleep on the garage floor, thin blanket, visible ribs, skin stained with oil. The fourth, me holding a plate of burnt toast, a forced smile on my face, tears caught mid-fall. I documented everything, I said. Even when I had nothing, I kept proof. Because one day I knew I'd show it to you. Not to guilt you, but to wake you up. He flipped to the last page. And there, taped carefully, was a picture of him. Standing in the hallway, looking away as Brianna struck me in the kitchen. His hands in his pockets, expression flat, like none of it mattered. He stared at the image like he was looking into a mirror and finally seeing the cracks. I didn't know you took this," he whispered. "You looked away so many times, Liam," I said. "So I made sure one of those moments would always be looking back at you." Tears spilled down his cheeks. "What do I do now?" he asked. I stood. "You start again. But not with money. Not with pity. You start by earning back the thing you threw away." "What's that?" "My name." He nodded slowly, and for the first time, I walked away without trembling. Because the woman who once begged for scraps was now the one holding every page of the story they tried to erase. And I wasn't done writing. After the interview, the court filings, and the footage, people assumed I would disappear again. Quietly retreat into a soft, luxurious retirement. Take the money. Live peacefully. Let the past rest. But I didn't, because I couldn't. Every night I lay on silk sheets, I still heard the sound of Brianna's heels stomping down the garage stairs. I still saw the flash of Liam's eyes as he turned away. I still tasted the bitterness of blood in my soup and vinegar in my hair. So I made a decision. I would never let another woman suffer what I did alone. I called Ms. Delaney, my lawyer. "I want to create something," I told her. "A place for women like me. For the forgotten. The beaten. The blamed." Within a month, I launched it, Kuznetsova House. Not just a shelter. A sanctuary. A place where women over 50 could go when no one else would take them in. Too old, too poor, too inconvenient. Those were the words they heard before. Not here. Here, we gave them therapy. A room. Legal help. A voice. The media couldn't get enough of the story. Former victim now funds National Support Network for Abused Elder Women. From garage floor to guardian angel, the Marta Kuznetsova movement. But this wasn't about fame. This was about redemption for them and maybe for me. On opening day, I spoke to a room of 50 survivors. Each woman had a different face. But their stories? Uncannily similar. He made me sleep on the floor. She threw food at me. My son told me to shut up and take it. One woman, Maria from Ukraine, broke down in tears as she hugged me. "I thought I was the only one," she whispered. "No," I said. "You were just the only one they tried to silence." We cried together. And that night, as I walked through the new facility, fresh paint, beds made with love, names on every door, I stopped in front of room 17. The nameplate? Eleanor Whitlock. It wasn't my name, but it was a name I once used when I was hiding. I placed it there as a reminder that every woman has many lives. Some die in pain, but others rise in fire. And while Brianna and Liam sat in their cold apartment, shunned, broke, forgotten, I was being written into the history of healing. But even with that, there was one more step, one final choice I had to make. And it involved them. It had been 6 months since Brianna scrubbed my floors, 5 since Liam cried in the park, 3 since the shelter opened its doors. My name was now printed on donation boards, whispered with reverence in survivor circles. Marta Kuznetsova, the woman who bled, rose, and built an empire from her scars. But even then, I hadn't decided whether to close the book on them. I knew where they lived now. A decaying 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town, next to a freeway off-ramp. Their mail was often stolen. Their water pressure weak. The walls so thin the neighbors knew when they fought, when they cried, and when silence lasted too long. But they were still breathing, still surviving. And some small, bitter part of me hated that. One day, I sat in my study and opened an envelope from my lawyer. Inside, a legal update on their bankruptcy case. A single sentence made my breath pause. Your approval is required to finalize the lien on Liam and Brianna Whitlock's remaining assets, including her late mother's engagement ring and family heirlooms. Just a signature. Just ink. And I would take the last things they held onto, their history, their sentiment, their final keepsakes. For a moment, I hovered the pen over the paper. But something tugged at me. Not mercy. Not guilt. Power. Because true power isn't taking everything. It's letting someone live in the ruins you left behind. So instead of signing, I stood up, walked to my fireplace, and tossed the envelope into the flames. Let them keep the ring. Let them sit together in that cold apartment, surrounded by echoes and shame, wondering if every knock on the door is another camera, another headline, another reminder that I'm still out there. I didn't need to crush them anymore. I had already become their shadow, a permanent, unforgettable reminder that the woman they tried to destroy now had the world at her feet, and they had nothing but memory and regret. That night, I visited Kuznetsova house. Room 8 had a new tenant, an Irish woman named Colleen, 62. Black eye, broken ribs, no family. As I helped her into bed, she looked at me and whispered, "How did you survive it?" I smiled. "I didn't just survive, Colleen," I said, tucking the blanket under her chin. "I made sure they'd remember me every single day they wake up." The letter came on a Thursday. Handwritten. No stamp. Left at the gate of Kuznetsova house in a cheap white envelope, like it was ashamed to be touched by sunlight. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Tight. Slanted. Pressed so hard into the paper that the back was dented with the weight of her desperation. "Marta, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I don't expect forgiveness. But I have no one left. Liam is gone. He left a month ago. Said he couldn't handle the shame. I don't blame him. I can't sleep anymore. I can't eat. I hear your voice in my head every night. I see your bruises when I close my eyes. I wanted to end my life last week, but I couldn't do it. I'm asking you not to forget, just to look at me one last time, so I can say it to your face. I was wrong. I was cruel. I was the monster. If you never respond, I understand." Brianna, for a moment, the silence in my study felt heavier than the words on the page. Liam had left her. I hadn't even needed to make that happen. Guilt did what I never could. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter. Then, without a word, I picked up my coat and drove, not to her address, but to the place we first met, the old cafe where she brought Liam to announce their engagement, pretending I was family, where she fed me compliments in front of strangers, only to serve me slaps behind closed doors. I waited in a corner booth. She arrived 20 minutes late. Thin, gray shadows under her eyes. Clothes a size too big. A woman frayed at every seam. She saw me, stopped, then walked over like someone approaching her own funeral. "She's Saturday, thank you for coming," she said softly. I said nothing. She fumbled with her fingers, bit her bottom lip. "I used to think strength was being above people," she whispered. "Now I know real strength is surviving what I put you through." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't want anything, I swear. No money, no favor. I just wanted to tell you. I remember it all. Every scream, every bruise. And I hate the woman I was." I leaned forward. "You want me to forgive you?" She shook her head. "I want you to see me." So I looked at her. Not with rage. Not with pity. But with the cold clarity of a woman who'd walked through fire and no longer burned. "I see you," I said. "And I'll never forget what you did. But I've already reclaimed what you took from me. My name. My dignity. My life. She nodded, trembling. So, what now? I stood. You live, I said. You suffer. And every day you breathe, you remember that somewhere in this city, the woman you tried to destroy is helping others rise from the pain you once glorified. And with that, I walked away. I didn't look back, because she didn't deserve my pity, only my absence. 2 weeks passed after that final meeting with Brianna. I didn't speak of it to anyone, not Miss Delaney, not the women at Kuznetsova house, not even my own reflection. It wasn't shame. It was closure. And closure doesn't need applause. But the world doesn't always wait for silence to settle. One morning, I received a letter with no return address. The envelope was aged, the handwriting elegant but unfamiliar. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page, written with grace and precision. Dear Mrs. Kuznetsova, you do not know me, but I knew her. I was Brianna's college roommate. Years ago, before she became who you knew her to be. She wasn't always cruel, but she was always broken. I watched the change happen in real time, how she began lying to professors, controlling others, hurting quietly at first, then loudly. I tried to help once. She laughed in my face. Years later, I saw the videos. I saw what she became, and I saw what you survived. I write to you not because I pity her, but because I admire you. I have watched every interview, every speech, every word. And what I see is a woman who did not just survive a monster, she outlived one. What you've done has reached more than those you know. There are women in Belgium, France, Spain, sharing your story. They whisper your name in support groups. They call you strength. They call you justice. And they're right. Yours in Genevieve Martin, Paris, France. I set the letter down and felt something strange in my chest. It wasn't pride. Not exactly. It was peace. Real peace. Not the false kind you pretend to have when you're too tired to fight. The real kind, the kind that lives in your spine, steady and calm. That night, I stood before the mirror in the foyer of Kuznetsova house. Same place I used to avoid. Same place I once whispered, she's almost gone. But this time, I said it aloud. She's not gone. She's reborn. And, for the first time, I believed it. Her name was Klara Vasilieva. She arrived at Kuznetsova house just after sunset one rainy Tuesday. No luggage. Just a swollen eye, cracked lips, and a silence that spoke louder than any scream. She wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Not even mine. I watched from my office window as she stood in the lobby, arms wrapped tight around herself like she was afraid she might shatter if she exhaled too loudly. I didn't approach her the first day, or the second. Survivors bloom on their own terms. And I'd learned the hard way, healing can't be forced. But on the third night, I found her sitting in the garden behind the house, staring up at the moonlight like she was asking it to swallow her. I stepped beside her quietly. First time you've come outside, I said. She didn't respond. So I sat. We didn't speak for nearly 5 minutes. But then she whispered, I haven't felt safe in 11 years. I looked at her, not the bruises, not the busted lip, but the hollow in her voice. That aching emptiness that comes from being told, over and over, you don't matter. I know that feeling, I said gently. I lived in it for too long. She finally turned to face me. You, she asked, doubt and disbelief tangled in her voice. I smiled. Oh yes, more than once, I was told I was just an old, useless woman, worth less than the dirt I walked on. She swallowed hard. Her jaw trembled. My husband made me eat off the floor, she said suddenly, as if choking on the words. He said I didn't deserve utensils, that I was a burden. The flash of memory hit me like ice. Soup on the tile. Her laughter. My shaking hands. I reached into my coat pocket and took out a small brass object. A key. Old. Ornate. Symbolic. I'd kept it as a reminder. The original skeleton key to my room in their house. The garage. I handed it to Clara. "What is this?" "A promise," I said. She looked at me, confused. "This key used to lock me inside a space, meant to break me," I continued. "Now it opens doors for others. It's yours now. And one day, you'll pass it on." She stared at it, then at me. For the first time, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," I replied softly. "Thank you, because every woman who survives, who walks through this gate, who stands again after being torn down, reminds me why I didn't give up." And in her eyes, I saw the version of myself that once knelt beside a cracked wall in silence. But now, she stood. And she had a key. The house was quiet. Not the kind of silence I once feared. Not the cruel silence of a locked garage or a bruised rib or a door that never opened when I cried. This was a peaceful silence. A full silence. The kind that follows after a long fight has finally ended and you're still standing. I walked through the hallways of Kuznetsova house that night, touching the door frames, the photos, the warmth that had replaced every corner where despair once lingered. Room 3 smelled like cinnamon tea. Room 7 echoed with soft laughter. And Room 17, Eleanor Whitlock's honorary room, held fresh tulips and a thank you letter from a woman who said she wanted to live again. I paused in the garden where the wind curled around my shoulders and whispered through the wind chimes. That garden used to be a dream. Now it was a sanctuary. I sat down on my favorite bench, the one under the tree we planted on our first anniversary as a foundation. Above me, the stars blinked like they too were watching. And I let myself feel everything. The weight of the beatings. The burn of the vinegar on my scalp. The nights I begged in the cold while Brianna sipped wine and called me filth. The silence of Liam as he looked the other way. But I also felt this. The fire that refused to die inside me. The moment I rose from that garage floor and decided they'd never win. The power in hearing my name spoken not in pity, but in respect. People call me a victim. They're wrong. Victims wait for justice. I became it. I turned my scars into bricks and built something eternal. I am Marta Kuznetsova, the woman they tried to erase. Now I live in every woman who walks through these doors. Every time one of them lifts her chin, squares her shoulders, and says, "I'm not going back, I know my work mattered." I didn't get revenge for the sake of vengeance. I got it for the woman I was, for the woman I could have lost, and for every woman who never got to rise. As I stood from the bench, I looked up at the sky one more time and whispered, "You didn't destroy me. You built me. And now, you answer to me." Then I turned back toward the light. Toward the house that was no longer a shelter, but a revolution.